Gators Breakdown episode 115 is ready to go. Rumors, reports, everything out there. Is Florida interested in Chip Kelly? I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. And joining me tonight, Bill and Will. Bill Sykes. You can find Bill on Twitter at RealBSykes. And Will Miles, you can find him on Twitter at Will Miles SEC. You can also find his work at SEC Country. We're reporting about the Gators, everything else out there. Gentlemen, Bill, I'll go with you first. How's everything been lately?
Oh, it's been crazy, man. I'm still trying to get back down to Florida permanently and broadcasting from yet another location as that saga continues. But I'm hoping to wrap it up in January.
I hear you. Yeah, say, my week is crazy right now. Trying to get the house. I'm moving this week, so we'll report what's going to happen with Gators Breakdown later this week as far as how many shows we'll have this week and whatnot. But Will, have we recovered from the ugliness that was Saturday of when the Gators traveled to South Carolina?
I think so. I think it was maybe better than what we actually thought we'd see, and I'm up in Philadelphia where Chip Kelly spent a little bit of time. So certainly up here have their opinions, and Philadelphians do not have a reputation for being shy about what they think about their coaches and the sports team. So it's been an interesting perspective to get.
Yeah. I talked about recovered. Bill, have you recovered from driving back and forth from North Georgia to Florida?
Yeah, I'm making it, man. It's just, splitting time between the two locations. I'm thinking maybe we ought to get a Gators Breakdown tour bus and we can just kind of ride around the country doing the show.
Oh, there we go. Well, advertisers out there, please. We need a tour bus. So
we need to GoFundMe, I think.
We would drive to Philadelphia to get Will.
It's going to be like the tour minivan.
Volkswagen bus.
Like when local bands get done and they figure out they don't want to do music anymore, that's the vehicle we'll buy.
True story. Okay, I was driving to Orlando one time from Jacksonville with a buddy of mine. This is way back. And we had a business thing down there. And we're coming down I-4 and we come up to this Camaro hauling a trailer, and it was that band Sepultura, that metal band from the 80s.
Yeah, I'm a metal fan, so I know.
They had gone into their Camaro phase, man. The tour buses were all gone. They were pulling their stuff, and they had their decal on the side, and they gave us a mean mug, and whatever. I guess that's what metal bands do, I suppose.
Well, when you've got the Camaro money, we'll all still love you, Bill.
Shout out to Gator basketball starting this week. So, three gore out there. Everybody will know what that means. Off to a great start for this Gators basketball team. So we'll do a little bit of basketball talk, but as far as right now, all straight football until basketball gets hot and heavy later on. So, I'm struggling now with my voice right now. So before we dive in, remember you can find all your Gators Breakdown episodes on SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube. Search on those sites or get the links by following Gators Breakdown on Twitter and on Facebook at Gators Breakdown. And you're on iTunes, please rate and review this show. And we won't bury the lead too much longer, but we just want to take a quick look back at the South Carolina game. And I don't know if I can cuss anymore at Doug Nussmeier or not. It seems every week. We can't be surprised by what we see, but still get mad because how incompetent do you have to be as an offensive coordinator? And my favorite phrase right now is third and long play action, and drives me absolutely insane. That was just another piss poor performance by him, and it seems it's the same story every week, and I get kind of tired of saying it, but it is the reality of what it is right now. And just you go I formation, that run play works, and you only run it 2 or 3 times the whole game. Hey, if it works, let's not run it anymore. And that's kind of where, I'm frustrated with Doug Nussmeier right now. But you know what? Only 2 more games of him calling plays.
What is the offensive philosophy here, Will? What are they doing?
I'm not sure why you're asking me. We've been watching all year and asking for something different. I mean, you'd think the identity would be running the ball, and they give their guys 9 carries. They average 6.5 yards a rush. Now, granted, a couple of those were longer runs that they popped, but still, they averaged 6.5 yards per rush for the 9 carries for the running backs. I mean, 9 carries just isn't enough, particularly once Zaire goes out of the game, and you sort of need to rely on the running game a little bit. the defense made some nice plays on the turnovers, but obviously gave it right back on the one play from Henderson. There's not a whole lot to take away from it. I guess the one positive for me, at least, is that I thought Felipe Franks looked a lot better. I thought he was chucking it downfield a little bit more. I thought he looked a little bit more composed in the pocket. He went through progressions a little bit. You can see some improvement, and that actually speaks really well to him because, you get benched, you get booed, there was the article about all the threats that he was getting, or not threats, but the abuse that he was taking maybe from some of the fans, and he could have buried his head. He could have looked for a place to transfer, but instead he went to work. He got better, and that's good to see.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Bill. I think you were going.
I'm at a loss for words, man. I don't have no commentary on this game other than to say, just like you said, 9 carries for your running backs. I mean, what is it about the passing game that they sat down this week and said, hey, let's not put the ball in the hands of the running backs. Let's just make sure we air it out. We got a good thing going here and there. I don't get it, man.
But it's like
it's over. I get it. They're on the way out. I don't care anymore. It's just but like for science, what the hell is going on here?
You know what? I swear, I think it's just Doug Nussmeier. He's calling every play like a few days before the game and never adjusting, never going back to it. Like, we talked about the plays him and Jim McElwain draw up on the first drive of games. I have it in my head now. He's just driving up. He's drawing up plays for every drive of the game, like on Wednesday, and never looking at it again.
And using a magic 8-ball. Will this work? It looks cloudy.
Go for it.
Well, we do now know why people were concerned about Zaire transferring in, certainly. And,
looking back at that, how weird is it that they would bring that guy in here and pursue these mobile quarterbacks and then not utilize their skill set?
But we warned everybody about it. We sat here and said it for days and weeks when he was signed that Doug Nussmeier didn't have a history of doing it, didn't have a history of catering to running quarterbacks. I wasn't really impressed with Zaire's limited tape out there anyway, but maybe he could push Felipe Franks. I had my worries of Zaire coming in anyway, but then from what we've just seen so far, I mean, look, it is what it is at this point, but look, it's really – I hate to go back and say revisionist history or whatever, but it really isn't, and it's not that big of a surprise. This is what we're getting.
No, we were all concerned about that, though. I think we all picked them to go 9-3. So maybe we're more optimistic than we'd like to give ourselves credit for. But that was certainly the concern going in. It's been the concern in his career for Nussmeier, and it is continuing to be a bit puzzling as to why you'd have a guy who can run and refuse to run him.
I'll admit I was wrong as too, because I thought Felipe Franks would be further along. So that's where I went with it. But
no, I mean. What can you say? I mean, at this point, the team's obviously struggling. I hope people will go out and support them against UAB and against FSU in particular, and make it a good experience for the recruits who show up if they have some official visits. And if there's a coach name before then it may be a much more hyped environment at that point.
Yeah, I know Matt Corral. I know he said he's going to be there for the last week, the FSU game. I still think that's planned. But if people missed it, that game has been announced. It will be a noon game on ESPN. So we'll get that ugly game between Florida and Florida State. It will be a noon game on ESPN. You guys kind of surprised by that, but it is 2 ugly teams right now. So
nah, I'm not.
Yeah. I did think it would be on Nickelodeon, but it was not going to happen. All right, guys. Well, like I said, can't bear the lead too long. We've seen the reports. We've seen the rumors. We've heard the rumors since late last week. Florida being interested in Chip Kelly. So, guys, I think we've seen it. We've talked privately a lot about this, and we got sources on both sides. I've got sources who saying it's close to a done deal. It's going to happen. Sources on the other side said they've barely talked. It's not going to happen. Florida won't go that route. It seems as each passing day goes by that it looks closer that Chip Kelly will be the next Gators head coach. But we haven't committed ourselves 100% out there from what we've heard. I don't think too much anybody really has. But it does look like besides Scott Frost, Chip Kelly is the name out there who may be the next coach of these Gators.
Yeah, this whole thing is a mess right now, man. And I know people are looking to us for answers, and we really do our best to not put things out there that we can't back up with good sources and things like that, and like you said, though, we have people that we trust that have been right in the past a lot, people that we know have legitimate info coming from the program, from inside, that are saying this is over with. It's just a matter of hours, if not days. And then we have others that say, don't buy it. Don't buy it. And so we're sitting here doing our best to kind of filter this out. And it's kind of hard to decipher right now. I mean, yeah, it's very possible that Kelly is going through the process. Maybe people are aware that this is happening and they're going through the late stages of bringing him on board and finalizing the deal before it's announced. Or maybe it's an orchestrated smokescreen. Maybe Scott Frost is, the candidate, or maybe it's somebody else. It's just kind of a mess, and that's the way these things go.
Yeah, and the athletic director, Will, I'll let you kind of speak to this. The athletic director, Scott Strickland, he said it during his press conference. Don't believe everything you hear out there, and he's even tweeted and if you want to say trolled everybody about every time. Sometimes people ask him about Chip Kelly on social media, and he responds with cryptic quotes and statements saying, "Don't believe everything you hear and see out there." Are you surprised at Strickland's interaction on social media pertaining to a coaching search like this?
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised just because it reminds me a little bit of McElwain's initial press conference when he was talking about Clarabelle. And, if you take this thing lightly and then it turns into and then the hiring doesn't go the way you want it to, or the hire comes in and isn't everything you thought he'd be, all of a sudden people are like, well, you didn't really take your job seriously while this was going on. So he must be pretty confident about who he's got to be doing that. And certainly, obviously you guys are a better source than I am, but you're hearing things from both sides, and who knows? I mean, I joked earlier today that if Strickland thinks he has a mole in the office, this is a good way to figure it out. So just start leaking names to each of his subordinates who he thinks might be the mole, and then figure out which one ends up on Twitter, and then he knows who the mole is. At the same time, if Frost is the guy you wanted to go with, but Frost needed you to sort of release the heat on him for a couple of weeks while he was finishing out his season, this would be an excellent way to do that. So, no one's talking about Frost tonight because all of the rumors are pointed at Kelly, and obviously, I think he'd be a fantastic hire if Florida decided to go that direction.
Yeah, let's go there. That's exactly what we're talking about here, is how good of a fit would Chip Kelly be at Florida. And, there are many ways to look at it, many obstacles that you can look at from his past at Oregon and how that ended, from things that happened in the NFL, and now he's taking a year off working for ESPN. On the surface, I think Florida, we know Scott Strickland said it in his press conference. He wants Florida football to be fun again. And from afar, looking back at the Florida that he knows, it was fun watching Florida. We know Chip Kelly brings a fun offense, a up-tempo offense that is pedaled to the metal. And that's what Florida fans want. That's what Florida fans want to see in the swamp week after week. It's, and then you have the look of, can this work in the SEC? That type of offense, and a lot of similarities to what we heard when Urban Meyer was being looked at for the job at Florida as well. So, Bill, on the surface, I really think that this hire would be a home run for Florida, a grand slam even. Chip Kelly, I didn't think he would be a serious candidate when this all started. I thought he would be more of an NFL guy. But, the more I look at it and sit here and think about it, I think it's worth the risk. If you want to go, look, a lot of these questions we're hearing about Chip Kelly, would he be interested? Would he get along with people? Would he go back to the NFL? A lot of that was the same things we heard about Nick Saban when he left the Dolphins and went to Alabama.
Yeah, I think there's similarities with Saban, and I was actually going to mention the same thing at the same time. I hate it because it's cliche, and we may never see another Saban, but you're right. As worried as people are about about Kelly going back to the NFL, I think Frost is the bigger concern with that. He's got a guy got experience in the NFL as a player. He's got a lot of connections there. He knows that life and that experience, and so it's very plausible that if he came into Florida, a place where he has no sentimental connection, and resurrects that program, he's going to be a hot commodity in the NFL and for colleges. And I don't mean to make Florida sound like a stepping stone, but I mean, let's face it, if some of these guys, like Chip Kelly said, don't like to recruit as much and would rather live that, shorter work week lifestyle that they get in the NFL. I personally think he's at least a triple. If you hire Kelly, it's a proven winner. He's proven much more than Frost has. I think he's got a wealth of experience that Frost doesn't have while putting up very similar numbers. I think he'd be an outstanding fit and an outstanding hire.
And Will, it kind of goes back to what we talked about last week when you kind of brought up David Shaw's name in an article that you wrote. It was more about getting a guy who's accomplished more, not getting a guy that you hope would be a fit. If you get Chip Kelly, this guy, given his track record, is a great college football coach.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think maybe the comparison, and obviously it's on the other side of the ball, but maybe the comparison is Pete Carroll. Mm-hmm. So, Pete Carroll obviously was with the Patriots, struggled there, then comes to USC and absolutely dominates. And now after, an 8 or 9 year stay at USC, then goes on to the Seahawks and shows some success in the NFL. I mean, the reality is if Chip Kelly can replicate the success that Carroll had at USC, Florida fans aren't going to mind to see him going off to coach the Buccaneers or whatever he does after 5 or 6 years. And he's going to fix the offense. I mean, that is his reputation. He's an offensive coordinator. They were much better when they brought him in under Bellotti. They've been much better. They were much better when he was the head coach. And then when he left, the offense started to get a little bit worse, particularly when Marcus Mariota left. And then he showed the same thing in the NFL. I mean, Nick Foles threw 27 touchdowns and had 2 interceptions in his first year with the Eagles. I mean, 27 touchdowns with Nick Foles is a miracle. I mean, Nick Foles is a pretty decent player, but I mean, he was in conversations for the MVP that first year, and certainly his stay in Philadelphia didn't end the way it was supposed to. But that's also because they gave him control of personnel, and being a general manager in the NFL is a way different job than being a coach. So, Triple, I think, is underselling it a little bit. I really do think this is something where you've got a guy who has a definitive track record of winning, who took a team, quite honestly, with recruiting classes that were not top 5 and took that team to the national championship game and competed with teams that do have those sorts of recruits. So this is a hire that I can fully support based on the on-field stuff. Now, obviously, I think some people have concerns about the off-field stuff, and that's maybe where some people have some hesitations.
Well, how'd you know I was going there next, man? Come on. Okay. One thing we've heard, look, guys, we'll get into on-field, like recruiting and offense and defense and what Kelly's going to bring. But, yeah, Will, brought it up. And it is the worry out there of Chip Kelly. Will he go to the NFL? What happened when he was at Oregon? And some of the things that you go back and look at is, one thing people have brought up is the personality. And the thing about Jim McElwain, he didn't get along with the higher-ups at Florida. And now the worry at Chip Kelly was about boosters. And I did some, going back and looking at what some things have been written about Chip Kelly and the booster world at Oregon, and William Et Week had an article back in the day, and it was talking about several boosters, and many anonymously slammed Kelly's unwillingness to participate in the kind of schmoozing and glad-handing that made both of his predecessors, Bellotti and Rich Brooks, so popular from Sunday to Friday. Quote, a number of substantial Oregon football boosters, many of whom requested anonymity, expressed a widespread annoyance with Kelly. The coach with the highest winning percentage among BCS conference coaches is at odds with many of those closest to the Oregon program. Although most would agree Kelly is an extraordinary coach, he doesn't care much for the many obligations that come with his job. Another Oregon alum, Jack Roberts, told the paper, some of the college boosters have gone on as far as to say, I hope he does leave so we can get somebody who appreciates the fans. Quote, as revolutionary as Chip has been on the field with the no-huddle offense, he's been more revolutionary in how he acts towards social functions. So you go back and look at what had some of the boosters said about Kelly. Was it a warm perception of Chip Kelly and the boosters there? Of course, he won there, and a lot of people say, well, if you win, they overlook stuff. But looks like some of these boosters, it didn't matter if he was winning. They didn't get the handshakes, and they didn't get as close to him as they would like. Of course, I'm not a booster at Florida where I spend a whole lot of money and would expect the head coach to share a table with me at dinner or anything. But this part right here, hey, it doesn't bother me at all.
No, I mean, I think, like you said, if he wins, no one's going to care. And this is also one of those areas where maybe it's good to have Spurrier in the program as an ambassador, that you can send him around and let him do all the glad handling. And that, that's all the stuff he enjoys doing, right? I mean,
Yep.
and if Florida's putting up 50 against Georgia, you can bet Spurrier's going to crow about it. So, I mean, maybe that's the area where we're having him around. It seems to make a difference, because obviously having Spurrier around seemed to irk McElwain a little bit. But I think maybe having him take on some of those social responsibilities for Kelly may be a way to make that work.
Yeah, let me also add that the Florida Gators have 6 passing touchdowns this year. I don't think this is going to be a concern.
Well, you mean if he averages an AP rank of 5 over the next 4 years, no one will complain about him?
I mean, listen, here's the thing. Oregon, I look at them and it's being in a different world with their football program and what their expectations are. And, I think they had reached the pinnacle of success for that program under him. And now that's what they were missing, is they want to feel like family, and because they were having the good times, and maybe he wasn't part of that party because of his mannerisms or whatever. But at Florida, whatever semblance of expectations about personality, I know what people are saying about McElwain and how he was divisive in the administration and blah, 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 blah. The guy was terrible and putting a terrible product out there. And right now, if you have a guy that can field a quarterback that's functional and he throws for 20 touchdown passes, that's just not going to matter at all. He could be the biggest jerk in Gainesville and they won't care. But you come out and throw for 6, 8, 10 touchdown passes, in year 2 or 3, we'll be right here again. Well, not right here. I mean, I'm not saying he'll be fired after 2 years, but you know what I'm saying. That will be the perception about what a jerk he is, and really it's just you got to make the offense work.
I mean, I think the key is Jeremiah Masoli, Dennis Dixon, and Marcus Mariota. I think Mariota is a pretty special talent, but Dennis Dixon and Jeremiah Masoli are guys that haven't shown that sort of success in the NFL, and spent a little bit of time there but didn't necessarily excel. I mean, I don't think those are guys who have special tools. I think they were able to implement his system and implement it well, and certainly better than Bellotti before him and better than Helfrich after him. So like Bill said, if they score, no one's going to care.
No, I completely agree. Especially us. I mean, we're not boosters, so we're not that privy to being close anyway. So for us normal fans out there, that's not going to be an issue.
The only place people might care is the recruiting stuff. I mean, I know that all these suspensions have been, that sort of, I think, started people going down the road of looking at whether Mac could survive is the suspensions, just because it is a black eye for the university. And so the recruiting stuff that was going on under Kelly, that maybe is what's more concerning to people is, if he were to get into some trouble with the NCAA because he's trying to cut an angle rather than recruit, full tilt, then maybe that's why people might get upset. But again, nobody at Oregon was upset about the recruiting stuff until he left. And they were all happy when they were playing in the championship game, and I'm sure they were defending him just like we would if there was something going on in the background, but the team was winning.
Absolutely. So, Will, you may be able to speak more to this because it was, this is the kind of the ugly side of what we've heard about Chip Kelly, and some people choose to believe it or not believe it. But there was the label of a racist while he was at Philadelphia coaching the Eagles. You had to go back and look at and kind of look at the history of that. And you were around it. You were up there around then at that time, right?
Oh yes, I was here.
Okay, so I had to go back and in a report published by CBS Philly, alleges that Deshaun Jackson, when he was cut, he was a problem in the locker room. The report also alleges that Jackson cussed out Coach Chip Kelly on several occasions. The report quotes sources close to and around the team, including current and former players, as well as additional sources within the Eagles. That's where the tantrums and all that stuff came from Jackson. According to the report, not only did Jackson cuss out Kelly several times, but he was blatantly insubordinate and regularly threw tantrums. It was also alleged that other players didn't like Jackson, which could very well be true because no one came to his defense after he was released. A source report flat out said that Jackson's release had nothing to do with alleged gang ties, and that certain players like Jeremy Maclin would have had an issue if Jackson returned to the team in 2014. There's a quote here. The fact is, Jackson was a me guy with an attitude problem, and Macklin is the complete opposite. A team guy, a great character guy you go to war with, said one source. Funny how Jackson has this anti-bully thing, and he thought he could push Kelly around. He found out otherwise. His being cut had nothing to do with the gang stuff. The team knew it. Everyone knew he had ties. Those were his guys. That's okay. What put him out was his selfishness. He can try and spin it all he wants, how he's a team player. He's not. I'll put it this way. When it came out that Jackson was released, more than a few guys were happy it happened. They said good riddance. He had no real connection with anyone. So, it's kind of, it got labeled because also LaShawn McCoy as well got traded away from the Eagles, and I can dive more into that as well. But Will, you were up there when all this happened, and it kind of seems, it was the popular, easy way out to get, especially when LaShawn McCoy was traded away. He didn't come out and say Kelly was a racist, but he kind of insinuated it. The quote didn't necessarily come out and call him a racist, but it's, quotes were sitting here saying, it was Kelly's way. The quote said, "It pisses me off. Kelly comes off looking like the bad guy here. It wasn't just Kelly that wanted these guys gone. Kelly got a lot of feedback from guys that they felt they were better off with DeSean Jackson and other players." So, is that kind of what you were hearing up there around the same time, Will?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a matter of perspectives, maybe. I think Kelly wants to run a tight ship. He wanted guys who showed up on time to meetings. He wanted guys who listened to him like the kids in college did. And I'm not necessarily sure that all the players on the Eagles did that. Again, I'm not real privy to what was going on, but what you heard, and again, I think it's a matter of perspectives, right? That somebody who's independent and doesn't want to be told what to do can see someone's behavior towards them as being offensive, and the person who's trying to sort of bring them in line, for lack of a better word, just sees it as being helpful, and the two end up with that sort of, basically one person's like, well, there must be a reason for this, and the other person's like, yeah, there is, because you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And I think maybe that was what was going on, but again, I'm not privy to everything that was going on. I think the thing that really sort of ignited it was that he kept Riley Cooper on the team after Riley Cooper made some offensive comments at a country music concert, and then he got rid of DeSean Jackson and LaShawn McCoy. And I think that's sort of what ignited it, was having that dichotomy of, the guy who does something that would offend his teammates who's white stays, and the guys who are doing things that offend their teammates that are black get sent out. And so, the optics of it look poor, and there's no doubt about that. But also we've sort of talked about how Kelly has a way about him that's just sort of abrasive. And so, you can imagine how there would be a misunderstanding between him and players pretty easily if he just doesn't want to put up with any garbage, and what he perceives as garbage is something he's just not going to deal with, and he's going to jettison those guys. And you saw that when they finally gave him general manager power. I mean, he brought in Sam Bradford, he got rid of DeSean Jackson, got rid of LaShawn McCoy, and the team was terrible. So clearly what he was doing wasn't completely correct, because they weren't winning as much as they were beforehand.
Hey, Bill, before I'll kind of lead you in with this quote here, LaShawn McCoy's kind of changed his tune a little bit. Not from the last time he's kind of talked about Chip Kelly. This was kind of this quote from a report, based on their past, you'd think McCoy would tell 49er players when Chip was in San Francisco to quit the team now that Kelly's their coach, but that's not what happened. When he was asked about during an interview with NFL Network, McCoy actually had some good things to say about Kelly. McCoy called Kelly intelligent and said that if the 49ers players buy into his system, they'll be fine. Quote, every situation is different, McCoy said. The one thing I will say about Chip is that he wants to win. He's very, very intelligent. The offense, they'll find ways to get big numbers. They'll find ways to put up the stats offensively.
Yeah, McCoy originally had made some claims of, he really measured his claims of racism against Kelly, and they kind of, like you said, nuanced it, and it didn't sound like he really intended it to be as sharp as it came across. And that's true, like, of some of the other players who said it, like Brandon Boykin, and some of them actually kind of changed to say more that they felt like Kelly didn't relate culturally to them. Maybe it wasn't an intentional racism, but they felt like he just wasn't, almost felt like they said that he wasn't cut out to be a player's coach and to deal with of men of different cultures in the locker room that were adults, where he couldn't command them so much and couldn't have complete control over their decisions. And, it's just really muddy as far as what actually happened there. It's like, on the one hand, I hate the culture we have where something just gets thrown out in the media and it becomes a guilty as charged before we, really know the facts. But at the same time, you've got several people here saying these things, and so you can't just dismiss it. And so what we're stuck with is a mess like this where we may never know what actually happened there. But in the racially toxic culture we live in, I think we have to take these things seriously and say, okay, we've got a candidate for a job here that's had these claims levied against him by not one person who was an adult, because Deshaun Jackson was an adult, regardless of what his background was, but these other adults we have no reason to doubt their word either. And so is that going to make a problem as he comes into the Gators locker room, where he is dealing with young men that are younger, but many African-American men? Is there going to be, even if it's not a racial issue, if there's some cultural aspects of some African-American men, because they don't all share the same cultural values, they're diverse people, but is that going to be a problem for Florida? And the worry that I have with that, and where it concerns me, is right, wrong, or indifferent, whether this was a complete misunderstanding or if it was 100% true, that seed is planted in print now. And so if there's an issue in the locker room now where there's a gray area, where there's room for interpretation, where he says something that maybe is nebulous and didn't have ill intent, or maybe he did, I don't know, is this going to strike a chord in some of these young men's lives and in their brains as they're processing this and create a problem? So yeah, it's a concern to me. Is he a racist? I don't know. I wasn't there, and I just feel like we kind of have to just trust that this played out for better than it could have. But I am concerned about what it could mean for the Gators.
Yeah. Well, in dealing with this topic, there's been no more popular person than Colin Kaepernick, and who was the head coach during the year when the nil happened. That was Chip Kelly at San Francisco, and Kaepernick was on his sideline. He played him. He supported him. So, you can look at these things both ways when you sit there and want to label Chip Kelly one way or the other, because, he has an example to show. And, I don't think he would have gone out of his way to kind of repair his image because of what happened with Kaepernick, to say, I'm going to keep this guy on the roster and play this guy because it helps my image a little bit. No, I mean, he's a football coach, and I literally think he wanted to have Colin Kaepernick on his roster and be a quarterback because he believed Colin Kaepernick was a good player.
And you would expect that Scott Strickland, as the athletic director of Florida, would be able to get quite a few phone numbers of people who've played for Kelly in the NFL and ask those sorts of questions. That he'd be able to call people like LaShawn McCoy, Deshaun Jackson, Trey Burton, who was playing with the Eagles underneath Chip Kelly, and obviously a former Gator. So, and maybe even Riley Cooper. I mean, you can talk to many different people about what went on, and you can talk about conceivably what their perceptions are. And I think it's probably one of those things where both people probably saw what they wanted to see, and you sort of go from there. So I think Bill put it better than I am right now. But again, there are probably some. I mean, there's definitely a cultural difference, I would assume, between Chip Kelly and his players, and that's a gap he's going to have to bridge.
Yeah, part of that too is it's easy in these to be lazy and say, well, that's because he's a white guy and these are young black guys, but they also came from a lot different parts of the country, and he was recruiting mostly West Coast guys at Oregon, so maybe this was a different mix of personalities and regional cultures that he wasn't used to, and so you very well could have had a lot of factors playing into this, and I hope it was a big misunderstanding. But I am a little concerned. I'll be honest. That might be my biggest concern about this hire, just because not that it was that big of an issue, not that it blew up, but I just worry that could rear its head later on now that the seed's planted.
And we'll talk about the world that is Bill in recruiting, but you also got to think opposing coaches could use that as a negative recruiting tool.
You're daggum right, they will.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, let's face it, guys. You might not think a coach would stoop to that level, but it might be in their first conversation. If Florida comes up, they might say, "Hey, you're a young black guy, and you got big plans. You don't want this guy that's racist." That's just the way it goes, man. These guys are cutthroats. If there's blood in the water, the sharks are coming.
Yeah. So let's get on to some football. I may got people don't really watch us too much on YouTube. Our audio numbers are better, but I was gonna let you guys play rock paper scissors for who goes first. So
go ahead, Bill.
Will doesn't want to play.
Always go scissors, man. Anyway,
where do you want to start with that, Bill?
Man, I've lost my train of thought. I'm thinking about like solving the world's problems over here and rocks, paper, scissors, and I think Donald Trump called Kim Jong-un fat today. We're doomed. We're doomed.
Nuclear war.
I love all of you out there, man. I don't want any part of it. Anyway. Well, okay, where in the hell are we going with
this? Well, Bill, I guess I'll go with Will then, because Will had some, I guess we'll start with the most popular part of bringing Chip Kelly in, and that, of course, is fixing this Gator offense. And before we dove into the episode here, we kind of had a pre-show little 5-minute meeting, and Will threw out some surprising stats of what Chip Kelly brought to the table as far as offense goes, and the teams that they were eventually matched up against while he was at Oregon.
Yeah, so I guess the first thing is I'm not necessarily concerned about an offense as I am concerned about wins and losses. And so if you look at the team, so Kelly went 46-7 at his time at Oregon, and he lost to Boise State, who wound up the 4th-ranked team in the country. He lost to Stanford, who wound up 8-5 and unranked, but had Andrew Luck as a redshirt freshman starting. Lost to Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, who wound up the 5th-ranked team. Lost to Auburn in the national championship game. Lost to LSU to open up a season, and LSU wound up ranked 2nd. Lost to USC, who didn't win the Pac-12 because Oregon did, and they wound up 6th. And then lost to Stanford, who was the 7th-ranked team in his last year there. So
with Andrew Luck.
Well, no, Luck wasn't there. That was Hogan that last year. But,
that was the last year. I'm sorry, man.
But it was 17-14 in overtime. So, you look at it, and he lost those games to teams that had an average ranking of 9, 30-23. And, I know, Bill, a couple of weeks ago, you had some stats about McElwain and what he was how he'd been performing against ranked teams. And it was something like 3 scores, I think 18 points that they were losing in the games. And they were just, none of these games are blowouts. It's 22-19 in the national championship game, 26-17 in the Rose Bowl, 19-8 to Boise State. So, even in games where maybe Oregon was outclassed or was equivalent, they were losing very, very closely. It was a competitive game. The guy's a fantastic coach. And then if you look at the offensive yards per play, under Bellotti, it was 56, 55, 28, 35. Those are the ranks nationally against FBS teams. 2007, they hired Chip Kelly. It goes to 23, 10. And then when he took over as head coach, it's 24, 10, 4, and 14. So he averaged 13th in the country in offensive yards per play as a head coach, whereas Bellotti was at 34.5. And then Helfrich actually did a lot better after that. He averaged 8.8 in his 4 years, but a lot of that was because he had Marcus Mariota and that he was the offensive coordinator under Kelly. And certainly the defense suffered once Helfrich took over, which is why he's no longer there. But, again, Kelly came in, the offense immediately improved. The high-flying Oregon offense that we think of is really Chip Kelly's offense. Gary Croton was the offensive coordinator there before Kelly, and he's not necessarily known for that sort of thing. So, he wins, and his offenses are pretty strong, and that's really, I think, what Florida's looking for to hire.
Yeah, man. You mentioned the quarterbacks. He had 3 different quarterbacks in his 4 years at Oregon. The worst statistical season by a quarterback was his first year, as he was putting in his system where Masoli had 2,147 yards, 668 rushing, and 28 combined touchdowns. Each of the other 3 years, you had 35 touchdowns plus combined between passing and rushing, minimum of 2,600 yards passing. Each of the 3 years after the first year, there was over 3,000 yards combined from the quarterback position. The running backs always had over 1,500 yards. after the first year, always had over 1,700 yards. I mean, it's just monster numbers. A system that just blows holes wide open in defenses based on misdirection and making them pick their poison. The guy wins. I have heard a criticism that, kind of like people said about Norvell, that he took over for a good coach. And while it's true that Bellotti did a pretty good job of program building there and was there for a long time, there was a definite elevation from when Kelly came into Oregon and took over because Bellotti averaged 8 wins a year. Well, Kelly averaged 11 and a half. The average AP ranking in the final poll under Bellotti was 21.4. Under Kelly, it was 5. That's not even getting into the recruiting elevation and things like he did there and kind of how he just took that and broke new ground for that program. So, yes, he did take over a program that was doing pretty well, but he left his mark on it. And that guy's a proven winner. And, I should have probably said it differently after you kind of called him a home run earlier. The only reason I didn't call him like a definite home run is I just don't know that you could – there is some risk here, some with off the field with the NCAA and some of the, relational things. And I don't know that he's quite the sure thing that like Urban Meyer appeared to be when he came in. But this is about as good as it's going to get for Florida. And this is a big-time hire, and it's a hire that's going to make a splash in recruiting as well.
Yeah, so, I mean, in his last 9 years, Bellotti won the Pac-10/Pac-12 once. Chip Kelly won it 4 straight years.
Right.
So every
relative ease.
I mean, he just blew away the competition, and so from a coaching standpoint, I guess that's more what I was talking to, Bill, is from a coaching standpoint, I don't know what else you would want in a guy coming in with an innovative offense. And to be quite honest, the defenses weren't bad either.
No, yeah. They were. You got the stats on that, don't you, Dave?
I do. That was, the one thing, kind of the misnomer about him was, he has this electric offense. We worry about the defense, and we're about the defense falling apart. You can't keep the defense on the field like that. And, I'm a big fan of the S&P ratings. So people don't really know what that is, you can go search it at S&P ratings. I forget the guy's name right off the top of my head who is the brain behind that. But he has a formula that's, pretty important in breaking down stats and how he compiles his stats and his rankings. It's a rating system derived from the play-by-play data of all 800 plus of a season's FBS college football games and 140,000 plays. So he has 3 key components to the S&P: success rate. It measures success rate on 50% of necessary yardage on first down, 70% of second down, and 100% on third and fourth down. Deems if it's whether the play was successful or not. And then points per play is an explosiveness measure derived from determining the point value of every yard line based on expected number of points an offense could expect to score from that yard line. So he gives a point value to that. And then drive efficiency and opponent's adjustments. So using all that, they also put the stats together when the game was deemed competitive. So garbage time plays and possessions that have been filtered out of the calculations. The criteria for garbage time are a game is not within 28 points in the first quarter, 24 points in the second quarter, 21 points in the third quarter, or 16 points in the fourth quarter. So they get away from garbage stats and where the backups are playing and all that stuff. So you go back to all 4 years of his defense using that criteria of the S&P ratings. Oregon's defense in 2009, his first year, ranked 16th. In 2010, 3rd. 2011, 12th. In 2012, 2nd. In his 4 seasons, his defenses allowed an average of 22 points per game. This year, that would rank around 30th if you want to compare with his offense, and you're only giving up 3 touchdowns a game. I'll take that. And as we saw with the S&P stats, it looks a lot like these scores would have been in garbage time of the games, and Oregon had already had an insurmountable lead. If you go look at giving up 22 points per game, that did not factor in the S&P there. So giving up 22 points per game with the stats that we laid out, I'll take that in a heartbeat.
I'd take it in general right now. Yeah, I mean, you gotta
And that was probably really confusing there because the S&P, you could really have to dive into it.
Yeah, in a nutshell, what Dave's saying here is that when you factor out garbage time, when you factor out the times when they've got a big lead and teams are putting up points on them, after they're playing their backups, then they actually look pretty good. And what I think compounds that perception is the fact that they are an up-tempo offense, and the fact that does put your defense on the field more, but they're still hanging around there statistically, shows that they're playing pretty good football.
And you see the same thing if you look at defensive yards per play. So Bellotti in the 6 years I have it averaged 39.2 on defense. They were 23.3 was the average ranking under Kelly, and then it was 65.5 under Helfrich, and that's really why Helfrich isn't there anymore, because the defense got really bad by the time he left. And that sort of corresponded with Nick Aliotti, the defensive coordinator, leaving, and that would be my concern on the defensive side of the ball with Kelly, is that he had a long-time defensive coordinator there at Oregon who made it through all of those different regimes. And so, there wasn't any changeover. There weren't defensive coordinators leaving to go get a job someplace else. The offensive coordinator didn't leave to get a job. There's a lot of continuity, and so that maybe will be the challenge with Kelly at Florida is, if they come in and immediately revamp the offense, you can imagine his offensive coordinator is going to be a hot commodity.
Definitely,
but I'll take it.
Yeah.
Bill, we definitely got to hit the recruiting side of it. That's your wheelhouse, and one that you really pointed out, I think we probably could start from there and then maybe filter out, is the biggest game Chip Kelly coached in was the 2010 National Championship against Auburn, and Gene Chizik and Cam Newton in that team. I think Nick Fairley also is on the defensive line of that team. Matched up pretty well, surprisingly.
They did, and I have to kind of preface this. We need to do a show maybe in the offseason kind of about that Auburn 2010 team from a recruiting perspective when we dive back into that topic, as more of a focus.
If Chip Kelly is hired?
No, either way. I'm just saying.
Okay.
In Auburn, I call them the great outlier, because they
okay, gotcha.
were like the only SEC champion since 2006 they just don't hit the same marks recruiting-wise in the way the roster was constructed. Just less 5-stars, less blue chippers, which is a 4 or 5-star, less top 100 recruits, and basically what they did is they signed Cam Newton, and they signed 141 players over 4 years. So it wasn't cheating back then, but it was, they were getting around some rules to give them more draws from the lotto, so to speak, where they had more chances to win. Even if they did have a 3-star, they were more likely to find a gem because they had so many players. Well, when you compare the total number of players between Oregon and Auburn had, and this is in the 2010 championship game, they had them up by about 21 players or 22 players. Auburn did. So they had signed, and they didn't have that on their roster, of course, but they had brought in 141 and processed down to that 84 limit. So they had basically, had cuts almost effectively. So they had signed more players, but when it gets to blue chip players, 4 and 5 stars, Auburn only had 2 more than Oregon, 25 to 23. That was on their roster. The blue chip percentage, the percentage of the roster that was 4 and 5 star recruits, was 18% for Auburn, 19% for Oregon. The 5 stars, there were 2 on Auburn's team. One was Cam Newton was not one, as I understand. I believe he was a 4-star, and only 1 for Oregon. And then top 100 recruits, you had 7 for Auburn and 4 for Oregon. Now, the one thing I will say is Oregon's 5-star and I believe 3 out of their 4 4-stars were all freshmen. And so there was a little more star power on that team, but they were pretty closely matched from a star power perspective, even though you had an SEC team versus a Pac-12 in the championship game. And, of course, that game was decided by a field goal by Auburn. So it's just kind of fascinating look there, and it played out almost like you would expect it to based on some of the beliefs we hold about these ratings.
So looking, spreading it out from his tenure there, another thing is Chip Kelly can't succeed at Florida with the way he recruited at Oregon. And I think, there's different ways to break that down. But first of all, once you cross that state line and you get into Florida, that's an automatic uptick right there. Now, some people don't take advantage of it, like Jim McElwain. It took him a while. It took him a couple years before he could come around and get a class that, were kind of up to Florida standards. Would Chip Kelly come in year one and have those same issues, or would he hit the ground rolling? And that remains to be seen. But I would say, McElwain didn't he didn't have the reputation that you have of Chip Kelly coming in right now.
No, it's no, this is a totally different situation. And look, here's what people need to realize about the state of Oregon. Whereas Florida, typically the state of Florida is going to have 40 to 50, blue chip recruits in it every year. And generally, you get even down towards the top 100, you got kids that can play, and they're going to play at some school at a high level. The state of Oregon from 2009 to 2012 had 9 blue chip prospects over 4 classes. That means they had 9 players that were either a 4 or a 5-star in the entire 4 years that Kelly was recruiting that state. So if he had gone 9 for 9, 100%, he'd have 9 kids from his home state. And you just can't. It's just it's inconceivable that he could build a championship level team with that kind of home state recruiting base. I mean, they only had 4 national top 100 recruits while he was the coach there. They only had in 2009, his first year when he comes in, they only had one 4-star, no 5-stars. You look at their top 10 players in their state during those years, 2009 to 2012, you'll see schools in there signing players in the top 10, like Montana signed a top 10 player out of Oregon. Air Force, Portland State signed the number 6 player in the state one year. Idaho, Southern Miss, BYU. I mean, these are the kind of teams that are pulling top 10 kids out of Oregon. So there is no recruiting base there. You have a couple a year. So as a result, he had to go out of state to build his roster. I mean, it got to the point where for his 4 classes, only 17 of his 110 signees were from Oregon. That's 15%. Of the top 10 highest rated recruits that he had in a given year, there were never more than 2 from in-state. They still landed 5 of those 9 blue chippers, and there were 2 5-stars. They didn't get them, but one of those was a guy named Isaac Sayomalo, who chose Oregon State, but his dad was a coach and was best friends with a man named Mike Cavanaugh, who was the defensive line coach at Oregon State. They had been friends for 13 or 14 years. The sons were best friends. The son of Cavanaugh walked on at the same time Sayomalo did. He said it was basically having a second father on the staff. So there was a perfectly good reason they didn't land that 5-star. And the other one, and I'm going to get this name right, was Owamabe Odiguzua. And he was a defensive lineman that was a 5-star defensive end, had a crazy recruitment. He was from Oregon, but he had, right before signing day, he had Florida involved and Nebraska, I think LSU, USC. He kept changing his top 2 or 3 and then ends up heading south to UCLA. It was just crazy recruitment, and it kind of went sideways. But they built a great roster, basically took 7 of the 9 guys 5 of the 7 guys they really had a chance with there, and played at a very high level.
And I think the interesting thing is if you look at Oregon's recruiting, it's 30th, 12th, and 14th is what they ranked. So they were 17th overall nationally on average. And, Jim McElwain in his 3 years was at 14.7 for his 3 years of recruiting. But Florida's nowhere near that AP average of 5, which is so, Chip Kelly was taking essentially the level of kid that Florida's been bringing in the last 3 years and winning with them. And you look at his conference recruiting, and it was fourth in the Pac-12, 3rd, 2nd, and 3rd. But he won all 4 years. He won the Pac-12. So, not only you would expect him to get an uptick just by coming to Florida. Certainly, there are more blue chippers in the state, and you would expect some of those guys to come to Florida just because of his reputation. You don't really expect. I mean, towards the end of the Spurrier era, guys just sort of came to Florida because they wanted to play in the fun and gun. And I think you'll see some of that too with Chip Kelly. But I mean, the reality is he's winning with guys who are not necessarily top 3 classes. And if he starts bringing in top 3 classes, I mean, they're just going to be unstoppable.
Yeah, and look, I don't want to make it sound like I'm making excuses for a guy that said, "Oh, well, he didn't have the resources," because you guys know how I hate that when people are doing that with McElwain. Okay, I'm just setting the stage here. So we have to ask ourselves, is Kelly the kind of recruiter that can succeed at Florida, that can recruit at an elite level? And we know he didn't have that home state base. He did have a school that pours money in to attract recruits from other states. And so they did go kind of elsewhere, from California to Texas, bringing them from as far away as they could. But just to kind of break down the numbers, here's what the data says. Like you said, 30, 12, 12, 14 nationally, 4, 3, 2, 3 in the conference. Now, first of all, you guys have heard me say this. No playoff team has made the playoffs yet unless they've had at least one top 3 class in conference. So that's an important measure. Also, keep in mind, not only did he do that, but USC, as somebody pointed out on Twitter earlier, yes, they were on probation at the time, I believe, but they were recruiting at an extremely high level then, like 3rd and 5th in the nation. So to still have a 2nd-ranked class, 3rd-ranked class, that's excellent. Okay, now, on top of that, that was hitting the ceiling for what Bellotti had done a few times here and there throughout his long tenure. And while we didn't see Kelly break through the top 5 classes nationally, he was hitting on all cylinders for what that program showed they could accomplish. But when you look even closer, it looks a lot better. He signed 5 times as many top 100 recruits per class. That's on average than Bellotti did. He signed twice as many blue chips per class on average as Bellotti did. He improved the average national class rankings. Bellotti's was 31st. He took it to 17. His average conference class ranking improved from 6 to 3. That's a huge jump in conference. That's going middle of the pack where McElwain was to top 3 and being in striking distance of contention. He signed twice as many total top 100 recruits as any other recent coach with 11. His average of 2.5 top 100 recruits nationally per year. It's higher than Bellotti's 0.6 per year. Helfrich's 1.25, and even higher than Taggart's 1.5. And I know Taggart has a number 6 class right now, but when you look at it, he's not landing the same level of elite talent that that Kelly did. So because Kelly had almost twice as many top 100s per year, and we are seeing Taggart in his 2nd year, even though he's got this big class, he won't have many of those. Also, Kelly signed 3 5-star prospects per year. That's a rate of 0.8 5-stars per year. Taggart hasn't signed one yet. Even in his Bunton class, he doesn't have a commitment from one yet. And that was nearly double that of what Helfrich and Bellotti did on average. So when you look at it, Kelly's blue chip percentage might be a little lower at 30% than Helfrich's 32 and Taggart's 38. Kelly also signed about 4 more players per class, which dilutes that percentage a little bit. He's bringing more kids into the fold. So based on that, I think we see that Kelly drastically improved the talent level at Oregon, and he continued building it because he recruited at that high level with consistency. He demonstrated the ability to land elite talent better than any other recent Oregon coach, and he recruited a roster that played for a national championship. Now, it was his 2nd year, so you got to say, well, those kids weren't all his, but he actually he bolstered the talent he had early, and then he recruited a roster that played for another title after he left. So in my opinion, while this is a one-stop, coach where we don't know what he's done would do at another program, we have every reason to believe that he maximized the resources he had. He set a new standard in many metrics for that school. And to me, yes, he has shown that he has enough recruiting chops to get it done at Florida and be a heck of a lot better than McElwain.
The 5-star nerd, everybody.
We got S&P ratings. We got top 100 signing. Going all the way up to Spokane for
I'm stuck in the matrix right now. I'm seeing numbers all over the place.
I know Kung Fu.
Red pill or blue pill?
Was that too many numbers?
No, heck no. That's it's called Gators Breakdown for a reason.
The Nerd Nation knows what's up, man. They're eating up right now.
People know with this podcast. If they listen, this is nothing new. And there we go. So, yeah, but that was some good stuff there from there. I did have a Twitter question that came in, so I definitely want to hit on that before we sign off. I wanted to go about an hour here. That's about what we're doing. But well, I thought I had another thought, but now I think it escaped me. So, oh yeah, this would be if Chip Kelly's hired. We'll do another show this week sometime. I know Will's busy, so probably be Bill and I later in the week if something happens any kind of soon. From
the tour bus.
Yeah, as some of the rumors suggest. But there's a lot of questions about the staff that Chip Kelly would bring along. I think we may just wait on the hire for that, just because of just the natural part of that. There are some names out there that we know he'll probably go look at, but I think we just may wait on that one.
Yeah, that's cool. I am doing my homework on it. Can't wait to get into that. I'm going to be digging up some good recruiting, kind of hired gun coaches in addition to some of the ones that we've heard out there that he might target or maybe should target.
Yeah. So here's the question from Give Me Frost. So the question does pertain to that at JCO88 _, and he sent this to us. Who you got? Question. Better for the Gators in 3+ years, Frost or Chip Kelly?
I mean, I think it's Kelly. I think Kelly has the track record. I think Frost, for all the talk about Kelly potentially leaving for the NFL, I think Frost is a guy who's got the NFL experience as a player, who can relate to that, who knows what he'd be getting into, and potentially might leave for that because it'd be a bigger payday. And quite honestly, it'd be sort of the next challenge if he's successful at Florida. I think both of them can probably be successful, but I think if you look at which one has the track record, Kelly's got the better track record, and he's who I'd go with. And in fact, if you look at Oregon under Frost, that was with a lot of Kelly's players. And so, certainly he's done an outstanding job at UCF, and I think he'd do a good job at Florida. But I like track record. I like going with the guy who's proven, and I think Kelly's proven way more than Frost has.
I'm going to agree with Will here. I like proven commodities, and I think that you could make the case that you had somewhat of a proven commodity in Jim McElwain, but that was just a weird situation. And I think, and I don't want to pile on, but I think there's just some weird things with that guy. It's just a bad fit. I'm going to go with experience. I think Kelly is going to walk into high schools and into living rooms, and I think his name and NFL experience is going to be better for recruiting and give them a little better jump start. And I kind of think he's going to be able to hire a better staff than Frost might. I could be wrong about that, but I think surrounding him with the right guys and with the professionals to help him get that done is going to be the difference.
Yeah, it's not so cut and dry as this, but why go with the apprentice when you can go with the teacher? So, it's I agree. Go with the guy who's been more proven. You look at it in 3+ years. That was kind of the question. I still think Chip is as well for the reasons you guys thought. I think he comes in, puts a better recruiting class together early on. So the program can build off of that for years to come. And I'm not so afraid of him going back to the NFL as some people are. Maybe it's just wishful thinking on my part. I don't know. But 3 years, I think he at least gives you that. If I'm being honest, that's what I think he brings. And I just like what the track record, like you guys said, 7 losses in his tenure there at Oregon. Coached in a big game, coached in a national championship game, knows what it takes to get to that level, been in that situation before, been in that big game. You can't replicate that. It's that success is not easily replicated with a guy that we haven't seen it from yet in Scott Frost. So it's just I agree. I was kind of surprised maybe we all three were going there with Chip Kelly. Man, come on, it's gonna make me laugh. Inside joke, sorry guys. But I agree. That's all 3 of us right there.
So, I think it's interesting what you said there about him leaving for the NFL. I went to a leadership conference a couple of weeks ago, and somebody asked about, should I develop my people because they might just leave? And the guy who was speaking said, well, what those people aren't asking themselves is what happens if you don't develop them and they stay? And so, if you bring someone in who's got the ability to win a national championship, there's always going to be the risk that person's going to leave. And that's just something you're going to have to live with if you bring in people who can win a national championship. And the same thing applies to Frost. If Frost comes in and wins a national championship in the first 3 years he's there, I mean, NFL teams would be foolish to not come and see if he was interested, potentially with all the success he's had on offense and with his NFL experience. And if you bring in Bob Stoops and he comes in and he turns the program around, potentially, why wouldn't the Jets reach out to him if they needed somebody? If you're gonna, we've talked a lot about coaching scared and running the quarterbacks and not being afraid of what's going to happen tomorrow because you have to win today, and I think the same thing applies to coaches.
My thing is, I'll let you go, Bill. If you leave the program better when you leave than when you found it, that's all I can wish for. And I think Chip Kelly would do that. No matter how long he's been here, a year. I don't think he'd leave after a year, of course. I've said that. A year, 2 years, 3 years. If you leave the program better than you found it, and I know people talk about, oh, it hurts Florida if you have a revolving door of coaches, and what kind of message does that send? If you win, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, because imagine if he had come in right after Urban Meyer and won a championship, that would be a great revolving door, and and really what you said rings true about leaving the program better than you found it. It's never, at least not since Spurrier has it ever rung so true for Florida, because let's face it, Florida may not need the next guy to be the championship guy. They may need him to be the guy that fixes the culture a little bit, gets the offense rolling, and just gets things going right. I mean, just put some fun back in the program, get some Gator greatness going with some big wins, and maybe sneaks an SEC championship out of there. Yeah, who knows? But it just needs to be better. If you're heading the right direction and things are getting better from coach to coach, then that's all you can ask for. With that said, I really believe Frost or Kelly and maybe some of these others, I think they're going to have a little quicker success in some ways than people think. I think there's going to be some rebuilding, some struggles, but I think especially with a spread offense where there's just kind of going back to how we started the show, where there's just a coherent plan, where they're making the defenses choose, where they're reading off of people, running some misdirection, and actually scheming. And I know that Nussmeier's scheming. I get that. He's a college football coach, and it's not as, probably not as incompetent as it looks at casual fans. But when you have something that's a good offensive system, I believe it can get better fast with either those coaches. Either one of them will make me extremely happy. I kind of feel like it's going to be Kelly, and I don't. Strickland's tweet tonight didn't really dissuade me from that. I think he was referring to the Charlie Strong part, not the other thing. If you want to kind of get into that,
the Jeremy Foley part.
Yeah, just to clarify what I'm talking about, Scott Strickland, the AD, tweeted out that there was just, he'd never seen such, misinformation. And I'm sure there is, and because like we said, we've had contradictory information, but he quoted a tweet that was from a message board where they were basically saying that Kelly would be the coach. And they kind of threw a blurb in there at the end that said that Foley was contending for Charlie Strong to be the coach. And we've heard that was not, that was a tongue-in-cheek remark, and I think it was a little bit of a troll by the poster on the last part. And I think that as an AD and a colleague of Jeremy Foley, I think he was kind of felt compelled to say, "Look, that's not true," because that kind of runs Foley through the mud in this. And that's not to disparage Charlie Strong, but just because it was obviously meant to be viewed in a derogatory manner, as if he wasn't a good choice. Yeah. So I think he wanted to kind of squash that.
Absolutely. Will, anything else?
No, man, I think we've covered it until we actually get some real news.
Yeah. If Chip Kelly is the hire, we don't have much left to talk about, but we're saving some stuff for that, of course, as I said. We'll be limited this week, like I said, unless the hire is made. I'm moving. Bill's busy. Will's busy. And it wasn't planned this week, or with how Florida, just because they're doing bad right now, that we're not doing the show. No, I had this week planned for a while now. You guys know if you follow me on social media, moving into a new house this week. So really, really busy, but we'll take some time out if the hire is made, of course. Have to stay up late night, of course, or whatever, however it happens. But we will get a podcast out there for everybody.
Oh, yeah. Got plenty of more information coming.
Absolutely. Anything else, guys?
Any big games this week?
Any big games this week? No, this week is terrible for college football. It is absolutely terrible.
Miami's playing Virginia, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. Can I get 10 wins?
Anyway, anyway, man. Yeah, it's going to be that'll probably be the game I watch, to be honest.
Michigan, Wisconsin, I think, is the other name game out there. But yeah. Actually, that is it on a little side subject. I'm tired of these SEC games the week before the last week. And, I mean, this week is terrible as a college football fan. So I'm kind of glad I'm moving this weekend because I'm not missing many big games.
Well, I mean, we didn't exactly preview UAB very heavily when we started. But,
that's kind of what –
maybe we should have, based on the way the records have turned out.
That is true. There will be there won't be a preview of the UAB game this week. Like I said, if we do have a next podcast this week, it will be because a hire is made with the coaching search for the Gators. So, guys, this one was fun.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on as always.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Hey, thank you to all of you who've been kind of bearing with us this week through the madness. I know it seems like we're kind of we're not wanting to commit to our predictions. Like I said, I kind of think it's going to be Kelly, but I can't be certain, and I just don't want to mislead you guys.
Yeah, that's kind of the way it is too. If I had to guess, it would be, but I'm not 100% committable with that thought right now. All right, though. Will, actually, before what you got, I'll let you plug what you got for SEC country this week.
Yeah, so I just had an article go up that was talking a little bit about the things that I saw with Franks and sort of the improvement, and then there will be a preview for the UAB game coming up later in the week for people who are interested.
All right, yeah. We won't get it here on Gators Breakdown this week, but follow Will on Twitter at Will Miles SEC and look for his article previewing the UAB game, which probably won't be as easy as a game as we thought when the season started. Bill will join me later this week if a hire is made. We'll get that settled out. You can follow Bill on Twitter at RealBSykes. I'm your host of Gators Breakdown, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. Guys and girls out there, thanks for listening to this episode of Gators Breakdown.